This cheese has been open for months. Are you trying to poison me?
It might be a little more chewy.
Chewy? It's complete rubber. Wine. Must I perish of thirst? Where's the wine?
There's a bottle we opened during the last recording. That's all we've got.
Sour wine, rubbery cheese. Is this how we are served?
Our downloads are low, Paul. It's some time since we went a recording.
Meanwhile, our fellow podcasters feast their bellies full on fresh cheese and swill down flagons of fine wine. Arr.
All of Time and Space have a new series on the go. I hear their storehouses and cellars are well stocked.
Then perhaps we should relieve them of some of their abundance, eh, my friends? They're good neighbours. They'll not miss a little of their plenty.
Look!
Stars are falling.
I see only one star.
Actually, strictly speaking, stars don't fall.
It has fallen outside the Something Who bunker.
'Tis an omen, an evil sign.
It's an opportunity. We've only got 4.6 stars on Apple Podcasts. Hurry, let's get moving.
Hurry? Hurry where?
To find the star before some other podcaster robs us of it. It landed close by.
But outside the bunker is still in darkness. Who knows what demons may set upon us?
Why, you chicken-hearted knaves, both of you.
It is but an hour till dawn. We'll follow you then, Paul.
Oh, very well. And to relieve the boredom, let's record a podcast.
We're with you, Paul.
Where's that wine? It might have been almost drinkable after all.
What I liked about the original scene is that he, having spat out the wine and thrown half of it over the extras, he then proceeds to drink it quite happily at the end of the scene when he's toasting to the star. So,
got you.
Yes, our scene, I think, had more consistency than the original.
Yeah.
Welcome to the podcast where we take something old, a Doctor Who story from the original series, compare it with something new, one from the new series, and add something borrowed, that sketch, to make Something Who. Hello, I'm Richard, and we're back with Something Who podcast episode 81. And this time we're looking at how journalist and companion Sarah Jane Smith was introduced in both the original and new series. So first we'll look at third Doctor story The Time Warrior from season 11. Then after that we'll examine 10th Doctor outing School Reunion from series 2. And with me to decide whether these stories are front page news or half a column somewhere deep inside are two Something Who regulars, our favourite storyteller Paul.
Good evening.
Hello. And science and astronomy writer Giles.
Evening.
I mean, I said last time that we met, it had been a wee while since we recorded, but it certainly has been a few weeks on this occasion, mainly down to the fact it took me forever to edit. Anyway, exciting news, chaps. We have a new review on Apple Podcasts that doesn't refer to our accents in any way. It's
the ones we just used, or
our regular ones. Yeah.
Does it refer to our newspapers of choice?
No, none of that. It doesn't suggest that we are in any way posh. No, it simply says, and rather charmingly, funny and insightful takes on stories I thought there was nothing funny or insightful left to say.
About?
Yeah. So, so thank
Sorry,
you.
Didn't mean
thank you for that.
Just
that
script editing that review there.
Review, Craig will.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, 9 out of 10 for grammar according to Paul, but very very much appreciated nonetheless.
Yeah. Okay. No, it was delightful. Thank you very much, mystery reviewer.
Yeah, very nice indeed.
So I mean. People always say that they hate those podcasts where they go rambling on for hours without actually talking about the subject. So perhaps we should dive in and start talking about The Time Warrior by Robert Holmes, as directed by Alan Bromley.
Alan Bromley.
Yeah.
There's a name to conjure with.
Well, indeed.
I find his visual style and pace almost as appealing as the northwest Kentish town of the same name.
Well, I did notice that the guy who was Sir Edward in this, Alan Rowe, was also in... Oh, no, he wasn't. No, I'm telling absolute
You can say Horror Fang
porkies.
Rock.
Yes, but that didn't have anything to do with Alan Bromley. That was what's
No.
her face. And he was in the Moon Base too. Anyway, we'll maybe come back to that because that was an absolute non sequitur.
There's a sort of sequitur between this and Horror Fang Rock, but maybe we'll come back to it. No, tell you what, why don't I just say it now?
Yes.
I mean, famously, this was Terence Dick's script editing, commissioning Robert Holmes to write a historical.
Yeah.
And Holmes grumpily said, "Oh, I don't like historicals. It means I've got to go and get some books at the library. You bastard, Dix." And then he returned the favour by making Dix write a historical. And Dix went to the library and got out the big boys' book of... the Ladybird Book of Lighthouses. So they both had a similar... They both pretended to have a similar attitude towards historical research, but I think Dix probably enjoyed it quite a lot.
Yeah.
But based on this evidence, I don't think Holmes was lying when he said that he didn't enjoy researching. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah. Well, it's a very non-specific period of history, isn't it? I mean, they don't... They mentioned the king and they mentioned France, but it's very light on actual detail.
Yeah, can we narrow it down any more? It's set in England. Do they specify that?
Yes.
Right.
There's
a king. So
yes.
what can we narrow it down to?
Yeah, and he's Sir Edward of Wessex.
Yeah.
It's suggested somewhere, perhaps in the novelisation, that it's during the reign of King John, but there's absolutely nothing to suggest that in the script itself. So who knows? I mean, I think it could be as late as it's probably a Plantagenet king, I'd have thought, but beyond that, I think it's very difficult to tell.
Yes, I don't insist upon acres of historical research on screen, or indeed accuracy, particularly for me to enjoy a story set in our glorious past. But something about this story is always not set right with me. Even from when I first watched it, when I knew very little real history, I always thought there was something a bit odd about it. And watching it again today, I realised it's because Irongron and Bloodaxe, the main characters, are Anglo-Saxons, right? That's what they would have to be if they were real.
Yes.
But we appear to be set in the post-Norman era because there are references to Normans.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, I'm not an expert, but is it...
Big battlemented castles, post-Norman.
Yeah, but I mean, my very superficial knowledge of the Norman conquest is that they replaced all of the Anglo-Saxon nobility.
Yeah, pretty much.
I mean, it might only have been 1-2% of the population, or at most, but and brought in their own mates, built new castles, and had the entire land under subjugation within 10-20 years. But the way they did that was to be ruthless with the top level of society, which meant that the Normans ended up within a generation ruling a primarily 99% Anglo-Saxon populace. So I could be wrong about this, but it feels ahistorical to have these characters, Irongron and Bloodaxe and their mates, larging it up in their own castle in any era after 1066, but this appears to be somewhere in the 1100s, right? So what do you think? Have I missed something? Is this plausible?
Well, there is a line in the plot that says that they have taken it. They've
Right.
sort of forcibly grabbed it from someone or other.
Damn it. You see, I was wondering if... I
So
told
they
you
are.
I told you I kept drifting off and missing bits, and I did wonder if there'd possibly been just a one-liner, and I thought it would have to be something along those lines, and I missed it. Do you think Dix put that in to get his mate out of a hole?
Possibly.
Because why else? Why would you write it that way? Is it important? Does it not work if these are? I mean, you've got your posh. There's a contrast here.
Yeah.
There's your posh effete aristocrat and your rough and ready, warlike, thick. They're not nobility. I still have no idea.
They're sort of, rebellious something or others, aren't they?
Warlord,
yes.
warlord, really. I guess.
I'm just wondering why Holmes wrote it this way.
Yeah, I mean, they wouldn't be tolerated for long, would they? I mean, the whole point,
No.
as you say, about the Normans is they would be pretty ruthless in, driving these people out. But I suppose the theory seems to be the king's busy fighting his war in France.
Yeah.
Sir Edward, who would be his agent for getting rid of Irongron, is a bit kind of depleted, so they're just having to rub along for a wee while.
There are, yeah.
Well, apparently, this is the benefits of doing live research, because I wasn't expecting to go down this rabbit hole. There was although there was continued resistance from some of the English nobility after the Norman conquest, William had to keep fighting. Apparently there was a battle in Southwark, but then he confirmed the Earl of Northumbria and various others with their existing lands under him, and they submitted to him. But then obviously further rebellions went on after that.
Yeah, I'm not surprised to hear that that's the historical truth, but for my money, this just doesn't feel real. Maybe that's what he had in mind. He's tried to map this setup onto the historical truth, but it just doesn't feel real to me. And I don't know why it is that this one story, which there must be far historical Who stories take far greater liberties with the facts than this, but something about the atmosphere, the feel of this, the basic premise, just doesn't sit right with me and spoils the whole thing. But perhaps that's just me.
There's not a lot of actual gore in it, is there? Which I guess would be a bit more... I mean, there's a lot of... They're about to sort of kill somebody, but they never actually seem to go ahead with it. So maybe that's one of the things.
I'm just trying to think whether there's anything to be said about bows and things like that, because don't the Irongron's men have crossbows?
Yes.
And then Hal is an archer. But I don't know. And we need to get your pal Robert Hardy involved in this, Richard, to find out all about them.
One of us should have read about
that,
time. I'm sure somebody's done the research for us in terms of where the placement of military hardware would put this.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't say it. I wouldn't say it spoils the whole. I wouldn't say it really spoils my enjoyment of it, because I think my enjoyment comes from other places. But it is fairly unique, I think. I can't really think of another Doctor Who that is quite so vague about when or where it's says. It's just like, here's a 500-year period of an old Doc Cotton and Sarah Jane in episode 4 are swanning around like they're in sort of high Middle Ages kind of stuff with wimples, and so on, aren't they? But yes, it's an odd omission that they didn't try and. But I suppose, I'd have assumed around the time of King John and all these rebellions and things like that.
I'm not going to go on about it, but
maybe it's just a chancer who's.
Or am I going to go on about it? But I mean, it's just the look doesn't help. As you say, visually, the designers don't appear. Must have been equally clueless, and have just picked things from all over the place. Because as well as the way they're characterised in the script, Irongron and his team addressed.
I just thought of a thing that I read that I briefly skipped past me in the production notes.
Right.
Which is a mention that Holmes got the name Irongron from Denmark. And what blood axe as well, which is quite.
They're actually more
Vikings.
For me going on
So
Anglo-Saxons,
I wonder whether they're meant to be another.
In Doctor Who terms, they look more like the invading Vikings from Time Meddler.
Yes.
Well, and there would have been Vikings. I mean, the last Viking invasion was 1066, just before the Normans. But I don't, and there would have been Danes, I suppose, still living in the north of England, but pretty few and far between in the south, I'd have thought.
So, what was Holmes getting at here? Because Irongron is written. So if you read between the lines, or maybe you don't have to look that closely. Maybe it's pretty obvious, but his dialogue is very typical Holmesian villain.
Yeah.
And sometimes he's got this sort of overwritten Magnus Greel sort of flair with invective. Elaborate invective about him, hasn't he? Which doesn't quite fit with his loutishness, and I wonder.
I agree with you. He does feel like he's. I mean, he's perhaps not educated, but he does seem to have a grasp of the language, which is kind of a bit above and beyond someone who's just a complete ruffian. All of the other people in his entourage are certainly painted as being, somewhat lacking in conversation, but he seems to have a bit more to say on most subjects.
Yeah, I mean, he and what's his mate called again?
Blood Axe.
Blood Axe.
I guess they're supposed to be one of those famous homes in double acts, but it took me a while to notice that because it doesn't really come across very strongly. There's one scene in episode 3 where you think, oh, they're one of those, but then it drifts away again. There's the scene where Irongron suspects that Blood Axe is taking the piss out of him.
I think this is evidence that maybe the whole Holmes in double act thing, further evidence that the whole Holmes in double act thing is a subsequent fan mapping of.
Yeah.
Because I mean, if anything, there were bits where I was thinking, hang on, Irongron and Linx are actually doing that together. You know, they're sort of bouncing off each other.
Well, of course. Have we discussed this precisely before? Because even in Talons, where the most famous double act appears, Jake and Lightfoot, as we know, they don't actually get together till the last 2 episodes, and they're both in other double acts earlier in the story.
Yes.
So even at peak Holmes, the double act is a fluid thing. He can pair any 2 characters together and get some business out of them. But then, as the story moves on, he can pair another 2 characters.
Yeah.
So it's doing him a disservice to suggest that he, like Eric Say would have actual double acts. When
so this
rather
story,
limits what you can do.
This story falls in a particular place in my fandom, which is it's the first season I can remember watching actually as a whole as a young fan.
Really go down this route, did we?
Yeah, so
I derailed it very early on.
73, 74. I mean, I remember seeing an old Radio Times in the sort of, mid to late 70s with the Time Warrior in it. But I very much remember this series. I mean, I have isolated memories of the Green Death and of Planet of the Daleks, but in terms of this series of the Doctor and Sarah and so on, it's much clearer. I mean, I couldn't say that I can remember a lot about the Time Warrior from that period, but certainly, it's one that I remember having watched as it happened on the telly.
I am not quite elderly enough to make that claim. I think I probably read the Target book first.
Yeah.
When did it come out on video?
Oh,
early 90s?
No, it was.
It would have been the book, and of course, famously, the prologue is written by Holmes, isn't it? Is that this one?
Yes.
And I think one could tell, even as a child, that there's something odd about that prologue, even though he wasn't credited, and I didn't know for many years why it was that Terence Dicks suddenly developed a completely different style of writing and sense of humour in the first half a dozen pages.
Yeah. I do rather like that. Sorry, well, we'll go to Giles in a sec. I do rather like, I was going to say, the title sequence, and we don't get very much of it before Pertwee's gone, and we've got a different version of it for Tom Baker. But there's something about it that's rather splendid. Yeah, Giles, how did you come across it?
Do you remember noticing the change in title sequence when you first saw it? Then was it like me with season 18?
Not really. I don't think I remember the wibbly wobbly one from the previous few series of Pertwee. So I think that was just the title sequence as far as I remember it. So how did you come across it, Charles?
I'm probably of a similar ilk to Paul. I do think I have very vague memories. I think one of my first Doctor Who memories might be Pertwee fighting the Sontaran, but I always. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is. So I must have caught a glimpse of it. Yeah, but I don't remember anything much more than that. And then it would have been reading the novelisation, which I think was 78 or 79. So that would have been that cover was very.
Yes, it was. It was quite distinctive. Wasn't
very
it?
good, very gripping.
Oh, I'm going to have to Google this because I can't remember it. I don't think I had the original cover.
Oh, okay.
It's got the Sontaran spaceship on it, hasn't it?
Oh, what?
Yes,
Oh, that is the original. Okay, my mistake.
Yes.
I do remember it.
Yeah, no, it's got Linx
Now
coming out the screen like one of the stereo MCs, and I was always slightly troubled by it because I was thinking, is this a photo? Or is this, because it struck me as being very photorealistic.
Yeah.
In a way that a lot of the other ones weren't. For some reason that bugged me slightly. I thought, is it a model that they photographed? Yes. No, I thoroughly enjoyed the novel. and I'd have picked up on novelisation, and I would have picked up on the DVD. Probably, I think I always thought it was probably quite a good one. Sorry, DVD. I probably watched it on VHS, courtesy of my pal Tim, who was able to source them from various sources in the mid-80s, I think. And I think it would have been quite high up on my list of, I'd like to watch that one.
I don't know how obscure we're allowed to be. I guess it depends how much time you need to fill. But I do remember seeing some extensive clips of this on TV in the early 80s. I remember now, because I used to always be on the lookout for if there was a segment about Doctor Who in a magazine program or something,
Right.
and I'd get the video tape out and record it.
Yeah.
And it was, I can't remember where this was. Was it Blue Peter, or was it the report of? Was it an anniversary? Was it around the 20th anniversary, or was it when Davison left? But there were clips of the Doctor and Sarah Jane meeting,
Right.
and a few other. So that little bit of dialogue. I'm a journalist, Sarah Jane Smith. You realise this is a very dangerous place to be in, Miss Smith.
Oh, yes.
Well, I can't
yeah.
help that. I'm stuck here now. That
Yes.
short bit is just absolutely burned into my synapses. So I can't.
Yeah, that does sound
And
familiar.
a few other clips, random clips in the story, including the part 3 cliffhanger, I think. With so anyone can remember which BBC magazine programme included that?
Was
well
it?
done.
It wasn't. It wasn't the Did You See thing, was it?
Could be. Could be.
That was one
did
that had a few, but I'm not sure that it had necessarily had that one. I think it definitely had the Linx taking his helmet off bit, or what did it have the other one from Sontaran Experiment? Anyway, I'm sure somebody will be able to tell us that I'm ranting ridiculously. One thing that struck me about this story is that the structure is a little bit like at the start the Visitation, because you've got the kind of you've got the star falling from the sky, you've got the kind of the sort of initial 4 or 5 minutes of stuff that happens, and then the action goes forward by several weeks, because by the time you get back to Linx, he's already kidnapped several scientists and he's got a whole operation going. Now, I'm not saying that Eric Saywood saw this story and thought about that, but it just feels like maybe it's a device.
It's got to be possible, because that robot, the Lynx's android, is reminiscent, if you squint, of the pteroleptal robot.
Hadn't thought of that.
Did we ever get to grips with whether or not Saywood actually remembered 70s Doctor Who and was pastiching it? Because famously, J&T said he didn't like the Visitation because it reminded him of Talons of Wing Chiang. But that was J&T's opinion. I think sometimes people get confused, including myself, and think that the implication was that Saywood remembered Talons and was trying to pastiche it. He had some memory of what Doctor Who was like because he hadn't seen it for half a decade. Anyway, we don't know, so let's...
Yeah.
It's unlike the beginning of the Visitation. It doesn't waste a lot of money by casting actors and actors that you then don't see again, and it also moves much faster, because though, as you say, it skips forward several weeks. It's so quick. Within the first couple of scenes, well, it's one scene, isn't it? One much more efficient scene. There's a lot of
Does anyone actually die on screen? I was just thinking, does anyone actually die on screen? Because it seems there's lots of talk of death and whatever, but it sort of feels like they never actually follow through with it. I mean, there's a suggestion. I mean, yes, Irongron, I suppose, gets zapped by Linx right at the very end.
Yeah, Linx gets an arrow in the phobic vent.
Yes, but
I'm trying to think what happens to the chap who looks a bit like a young Michael Palin, who gets captured and hypnotised in, is it episode 1 or 2?
Anyway, sorry, Paul, I derailed you from a magnificent observation you were going to have just then.
Had I not already made it? Was there more to come? How wonderful! I wonder what I was going to say. Did I have that light in my eyes that I get?
Yeah.
It's gone out now. Not even the embers remain.
Yeah. It's as bad as Pertwee's hairstyle at the start of this story.
Shall I moan? Oh, what?
Go on.
No. What you wanted to do?
No, I was just going to say.
Have you got a bit about Pertwee's hairstyle that you want to get in?
Not especially. I mean, it's just. I mean, He's got a lot of variations during the course of the 5 years that he plays the Doctor, but this is the one story where it all seems to have gone horribly wrong, really. Even by episode 2, it seems to have be a little bit more pertwee and a bit less, granny perm. But something somewhere has gone horribly wrong at the start of episode 1. It's kind of difficult to take your eyes away from it, really.
It's very odd, that whole scene, that whole setup, because the Brigadier has apparently got the Doctor there without telling him why. But he's convinced that it doesn't quite ring true that he's convinced the Doctor to go and be squirreled away in this house full of scientists or whatever, and by all accounts hasn't actually said what it's all about.
How has his TARDIS got there? Has it been sort of created in, or has he materialised it? I'm not quite sure.
You're more worried about how the relatively portable TARDIS outer box can be moved from one part of England to another than you are. Did you ever worry about how he got the console from between one laboratory and another through doorways a fraction of its size?
Quite.
Come on, priorities, man. No, UNIT always behaves rather oddly in Holmes stories, doesn't it? It's amazing. That's why I love Holmes in the Pertwee era. He just doesn't care. He doesn't care what everyone else is doing. He gets his 4 episodes each year and does something completely mental. Does what he wants to do, I was going to say, but of course this may be an exception because he was, unless it's another fan myth, he was forced to write a historical by Terence Dix when he could not have cared less. You know how people, like things like Moffat and Russell, say the same sort of thing, don't they? With the same self-deprecating sort of thing, like Moffat being asked to write Madame de Pompadour and not even being sure if she was a real or fictional character. But you get the impression then they do actually check before they put pen to paper. Whereas I just sorry, I've got to stop moaning about this. But it just seems to me to permeate the heart of this story, its nebulousness. You take that out, I like everything else about it. So I don't know why it annoys me so much. I think it's because I don't enjoy the characters of the Danish / Anglo-Saxon / Anglo-Norman Monty Python ripoffs, rejects.
So go on then. So how about Sarah then? What do you make of her in this first story? I mean, I guess devised legendarily by Terence Dix and Barry Letts, but given to Robert Holmes to make something of. She perhaps strikes me as being, a man's idea of what someone who is a feminist might say in some circumstances.
I was trying to be more diplomatic than that, because obviously it is a bit clunky at times, but I feel like it could have been a lot worse under any other writer.
Yeah.
Assuming, of course, that Dix didn't come in and add those bits. I don't know.
Yes. If Bob and David had it, you slightly dread to think.
Or Robert Sloman would have had something like the amazing feminist debates from the Time Monster, wouldn't they? It's also tempting to say that Sarah Jane Smith arrives fully formed. But again, I think she is mostly written true to character, but I feel a hell of a lot of that is down to Elizabeth Sladen. So even if you inspect the script more closely, I'm sure there are moments when she's not quite the Sarah that we know and love, but she gets the character right from the off and sells it.
I don't feel that you'd know. Yeah, I don't think you'd watch this and know instantly that this is going to become the best loved and most fully rounded companion of all time, though.
And of course, even if there was nothing wrong with her, I'm sure people at the time wouldn't have thought that, because she is so different from Jo Grant, who was so beloved by the viewers and by the Doctor. Such a reaction against her. But I'm sure there must have been quite a few people sort of recoiling in horror almost, that she's a bit sharp and spiky and know-it-all, and all the things lovely, cuddly, fluffy Jo wasn't. But of course she's in contexts here that she never will be again, so how can we say if she's in or out of character? Because never again will she be required to arrive in medieval England and think that she's in a theme park or whatever, So we only get those reactions once.
It's a good setup to have her thinking that the Doctor's the villain.
Yeah, yes.
It's another thing you only get to do
better.
once.
That's a lot more promising than not believing that you travelled in time, because that's probably what makes her unique. That spins out of her investigative journalism side, doesn't it? Looking for the story, looking for the truth of the situation.
Yeah, and obviously catapulting her into medieval times also actually does work quite well from the angle of, okay, we're going to have a feminist, air quotes, companion. I guess it gives her something to rail against.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that Pertwee's sort of shouting at, lovely Jo Grant in the first 5 time he sees her, and yet with Sarah, even though she gives him good reason to get angry, he always seems to be surprisingly genial all the way through the story.
Interesting, isn't it? I think that's more, off the top of my head, I think that's more because the Third Doctor's mellowed so much, because he is so spiky early on, isn't he?
Yeah.
Even in differently with different writers, but he tends to have more of that verbose, acerbic wit in the home stories, but across the board, his character's mellowed and become, as his hair's got bigger, his personality has softened until here we reach
very like Capaldi in that sense.
Peak fluffiness across the board here.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Did you like seeing Dot Cotton, although rather rared up on this occasion?
Always a treat. Yes. I haven't got anything else to say about that.
I mean, she really only has about two decent sections in it, but
I thought there was more of her than that. Than the memory cheats. There, I think
there could have been more fun. The relationship between her and her dithering, ineffectual husband could have produced more fun. I think I'd rather see more of that than more shouting dames. But there you go.
Rubesh is great fun, I think.
Oh my god, he gets all the best lines, doesn't he? I'd forgotten how funny. Yes. I'd forgotten how good he is when he gets.
Yes,
he's used sparingly, thank goodness. So when he pops up, he comes out with zinger after zinger.
Yes. It's just the way he's acting like a little bit of a Greek chorus on the whole thing. Like, oh yes, oh well, the Doctor was here. I suppose he'll pop up again. And he seems to do that. For someone whose whole shtick is to be apparently permanently bewildered, he's remarkably.
I mean, the Doctor does keep popping up. Remarkably, he keeps visiting the same places, and he seems to be strangely guileless as well. I mean, he keeps falling into pretty obvious traps. I mean, they even come back. I mean, I'm skipping forward a bit now, but they even come back to the castle in episode 4 with a plan to send everyone to sleep, and then he sort of forgets about that plan for a bit and has a go at Linx with his pathetic little sort of circular shield thing, which lasts about 5 seconds before Linx just knocks it out of his hand. And you think, was your plan to get captured almost immediately again? I don't know. It seems bizarrely ineffectual. And in fact, it is Hal who saves the day in the end, isn't it? Rather than the Third Doctor. Really. And Rubesh, of course.
And Frankie Rubesh for covering him over the back of the vent. Yeah.
Yes, I suppose he's given a clue to do that. But yes, he seems to need an awful lot of rescuing in this story, strangely.
One touch that is slightly random observations here. We seem to be jumping back and forth. But one thing I did notice that I thought was quite fun is in is it episode 1 where Hal is about to get executed and the Doctor... Or is it episode 2 has the robot Knight, and the Doctor shoots the control from Iron Grant's hand, and basically the same shot repeats in episode 3. Only it's the Doctor. And the Doctor rescues Hal, and then Hal hits Iron Grant's axe in exactly the same way and rescues the Doctor from that situation.
Yeah. Is this clever circular writing, or just a sign that he didn't even have enough ideas to fill 4 episodes?
I can't quite decide whether that robot is a brilliant weapon or utterly hopeless. In that, I mean, it's very good at attacking stuff, But do you want something that indiscriminately whacks you with an axe, or do you actually want to be able to point it at something? And I don't know. It feels. Go on.
Do you think it's described as script that way, as being a bit of a mess and reacting rather spasmodically and randomly, or is that just a bad design? Because the design, because it looks so cheap and appalling in the wrong ways, if that is the joke, then it kind of undercuts it for me.
Yeah.
Sometimes have a bit of a record for rubbish robots and things, though, don't they?
Yeah.
Maybe it's a
So, Sontarans.
Yeah.
Now that's a triumph, isn't it? I'll stop being grumpy about it.
I don't think they're ever bettered. I think Linx is, for me, is the prime Sontaran, and I think everything. There's a lot that happens in this story that they pick up again and again and again whenever the Sontarans come back. Kevin Lindsay, I think his performance is certainly part of that. But yeah, no, I'm very impressed with that aspect of it.
He's like all the best villains. He's a proper character in himself,
Yes.
isn't he? He's not just ranting and raving. Well, we've got somebody else to do that. But he's one of the rare breed of Doctor Who villains. I was almost tempted to call him amoral rather than evil, but it's a borderline. But he's also one of the only rational characters in this setup, and he just he's almost I don't know. It reminds me of the Rani, but he sort of wants to get on with his own. He's mostly interested in just getting on with his work and not being bothered. So Holmes does something very clever because he's invented this species who are presented as the embodiment of the militaristic, warlike mentality, gone unfettered.
Yeah.
And yet, he's not written that way all the way through. Because that could be very funny. But if that was his main point, getting these satirical points across, then he could have written that a lot more strongly, and then it might have, with a comedy genius, or it might have got rather old rather quickly. I don't know. But here we get the best of both worlds. I think the satirical points of the Sontarans come across right from the beginning with this silly little flag.
Oh, the little Sontaran anthem bit, and yes.
And yet, in himself, he's rational. He has clear motivation. He is seen with the Doctor. Their first discussion is very well written. The Doctor takes him seriously. Reminds me of those early Star Trek episodes where Kirk will come across up against his intellectual equal in a Romulan or Klingon commander.
Someone with a point of view.
Yeah. Looking back on it, knowing what we know about the Sontarans, where they are mostly used for comedy nowadays, it is interesting that he does both things in one character. Because most writers, and even Holmes himself at other times, would have only gone for one of those aims. But there you go.
But on the other hand, the comedy is very, very definitely is there, and the people who slag off the new series use of the Sontarans. They've reduced them to a joke. No, they were always a joke, and that was quite deliberate. I wonder, you saying about that and sort of having a villain with a point of view. I was actually thinking about and what you were thinking. I was thinking a bit Greel like almost, although I don't know, because Greel is perhaps more scenery chewing its Chang. That's the one with the point of view in Talons. But I was just wondering whether, because the genesis of this story, it went through, I think it was originally called The Time Fugitive.
Right.
In early drafts, I think it was The Time Fugitive. It was The Time something else as well before it became The Time Warrior. I'm just trying to remember what's...
Is there any evidence that suggests a different spin on the story itself?
You do wonder. Yeah. It was going to be called The Time Survivor at some later point. Although, of course, he did... but The Time Fugitive is, I think, the one that has the infamous storyline where he wrote the whole thing as a field action report from Holmes to Tevin Seddix, which is obviously the genesis of the bit of the novelisation that he did write. Apparently he was commissioned to write the whole novelisation and then either got bored or got stuck and handed it over to Terence and said, "Here, you do it," after he'd done the prologue.
We may be too far away now from the point you mentioned. You were listing other characters that reminded you of Linx.
Oh, sorry, no.
It seems like another link, obvious link back to the Visitation, by the way, because what's his face, the lead pterolepsil, and that is famously one of those, by that era, one of the few monstrous villains we get who actually has a personality and any kind of intellectual integrity.
Yes, yeah.
But
thanks for putting me back onto that point.
No, off topic. This is not the Visitation podcast.
I guess picking up your point also about the new series treatment of Sontarans, it was interesting. We've relatively recently for Doctor Who, we had a Sontaran on a horse in the Flux series, and but it actually says at some point, Irongron says, get Linx, get a horse for Linx. I think he says. I mean, we don't see it sadly because that would be fun. But yeah, so even in the original outing, that was set up.
I was actually impressed that in episode 1 we do get actual actors on actual horses. Yeah, and especially considering that David Dacre's horse is clearly not clearly a bit of a handful in that scene. You think, yeah, okay, it's not Terry Walsh in a wig here; it's them having to wrangle it, and that horse was kicking off. So,
yeah, we do get Terry Walsh in a wig. Sadly, I think is it episode 2 cliffhanger. There's a lot of sort of running around in long shot in the grounds of the castle that is just a little bit too athletic for probably Pertwee at this point. But I mean, it's not that big a deal. But you just sort of think, yeah, you're kind of making us think about that because there are no close-ups at any point.
Okay, conspiracy theory time. Is this the reason for Pertwee's ever enlarging hair? Because it's easier to it becomes easier to disguise the fact that it's Terry Walsh wearing a wig. It's got
the wig
got
has
a bigger
stayed
barness
consistent throughout the years, but it starts to look more and more. He starts to grow into his own wig, doesn't he? Basically.
Yeah, I mean the theory is that Katie Manning was telling him that he got a bald spot, and he was trying to get it longer and longer to hide that. Yeah. But I mean, whether that, I mean that's a sort of convention story. How true that is, I don't know. There's a lovely bit later on where the Doctor and Sarah are sort of really enjoying themselves on the ramparts, and it's a little bit too tongue in cheek perhaps that he's sort of lighting something and slinging it over his shoulder and with his insouciance. But Elizabeth Sladen's jumping up and down to see over the edge of the rampart. That's quite enthusiastic. I do think actually that at that point when Irongron's men arrive at the castle, and there's about 15 of them, and they make a sort of half decent attempt to scale the walls, it actually feels like they've got a decent force. It's everywhere else in the story, it feels like there's about 3 extras skulking in the corner. But at that point, you think, Irongron actually genuinely has a band. And for this era of Doctor Who, it's not a bad showing in terms of action.
Is it Havoc? I guess it's probably the usual boys. But
well, I mean, I was just watching
some with a bit more hair, and
I was just watching the thing about Havoc, the documentary, and they, I think, by this stage they've already gone. I think they're really sort of season 7 and 8 mainly, possibly a smidge of 9. But by this end, apparently Terry Walsh was getting all the work, and Havoc was kind of
okay.
At least this is what it says in Toby Haydock and Chris Chapman's documentary. There's quite a few parallels I got also with Day of the Daleks. Again, you've got, I guess, unit in the present day era, and you've got the Doctor and the companion time travelling to a different era. The Doctor's also tucking fairly heavily into cheese and wine at one point in Sir Edward's era. I mean, unfortunately, I think unlike Day, you don't get the return to unit at the end, which would have perhaps rounded the episode out a bit. I mean, it's perhaps in this case it would have been unnecessary, but yeah.
Well, it's funny, it was only when I went to get the DVD out to watch it for this that I suddenly spotted the Invasion of the Dinosaurs is right next to it, of course, which I've always known, but it only suddenly occurred to me, hang on, they both involve sort of time scoops, and and it's more a feature of Invasion of the Dinosaurs than it is really here. They don't make all that much of it.
Yeah, it's careless, isn't it? I wonder how that happened.
Well, and then Carnival of Monsters as well. So there's a theme here. Bob likes a time scoop. And when was this? Because Carnival of Monsters plays briefly with the idea of being historical, I guess, with the ship stuff. But we already know. I think we are pretty clued in pretty early that there's other stuff going on as well. I'm just trying to think how long it actually had been since we'd had a historical setting in Doctor Who before this.
Evil of the Daleks.
Evil?
Yeah. Could be.
I'm just trying to think. Does Zoe get anything?
I mean, aside from a few historical characters in The Mind Robber, but it's not a historical setting.
I suppose Abominable Snowmen
Well, yes.
counts.
It feels like it should do, but it feels like it isn't.
Yeah.
It's sort of Britain present day, isn't it? Even though it's supposed to be whatever the hell
Yes,
it is, 40 years ago.
Yes, yeah.
Yes, it's been a long time. Have they forgotten how to do it?
War Games, again, it sort of has historical elements in it, doesn't it? But not really.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, yeah, we're in pseudo historical territory, and it comes back, and then we're.
But yes, it has been a long time.
And then they don't do it again until Mask of Mandragora.
Yeah, Mandragora. Yeah.
Mandragora.
Do we know what Bob's brief was for this? Has anyone checked to see? Was he told? Was it just we'd like this in the 12th century, please, Bob, or was he told we'd like a science fiction story set in the 12th century? I'm just trying to work out how much he tried to fight the brief, how much he added to try and secure it away from it.
Well, he was doing something called the automata that was rejected, of which we know little. Yeah, and Terence suggested doing historical because they hadn't really done anything much. Yeah, the Time Monster being another sort of pseudo historical, I guess, and Atlantis, if that counts vaguely. And Terence suggested doing a medieval adventure. Yeah, I can't find out anything further than Terence suggested that, and Holmes agreed, provided it wouldn't have any actual historical people, any known characters, and could have a strong sci-fi element.
Yep.
So it sounds like he wanted to do as little research as possible and just set it in a theme park, which comes back to what you were saying, Paul. Which is odd, because then he relishes it later, doesn't he? I mean, with Wing Shui-Yang, obviously.
But he doesn't. I don't think he really likes anything pre-Victorian. I don't know. I wonder where he would draw the divide line. Maybe Enlightenment. Once people start talking like modern humans. So, did it live up to your? You mentioned earlier that it was one you're keen to see back as a nascent fan. So, when you finally saw it, and indeed today, did it live up to your hopes? Because it sounds like it's going to be we all know it's an important one with so many firsts in it. We haven't even mentioned the first mention of Gallifrey.
Oh,
but
yes.
Yeah, in terms of quality, what do you think of it? Because I think I've already hinted. I've always found it a little bit disappointing, and I don't know quite why.
It's not all that it could be, knowing the concept and it's obviously so long since I've read the novelisation. I can't think of what expectations I would have bought from that sort of foreknowledge. And I still find it quite an enjoyable romp, personally. I don't have, it's not, there's pleasure to be had from David Dacre, and I know that, I suspect, is the dividing line between us here, Paul, that I think you get less out of Iron Gron and stuff than I do. And admittedly, anything like that where there's lots of acting.
I feel like I'd have enjoyed all that more if it had been played even bigger, fully for laughs, because at least then I would have had the laughs.
Yeah.
But it just annoys me. It just looks like it just starts to look like a children's program with people.
I don't know. I don't think it really. I think David Dacre pictures it right.
Oh, well,
I'm trying to work out what the.
Of course he does. Both of them do a great job with those characters, but I just think they're on a hiding to nothing from my point of view.
Is it? Yeah, I don't know. Is it Blood Axe being a bit, wimpy by comparison, or?
It feels like I think that what Paul is suggesting, I guess, is that it doesn't feel genuinely historical. It doesn't feel like there's a lot of peril that's talked about, but there's very little that you actually see. And so I would agree that it doesn't really do that. I mean, my opinion of it generally has been quite low, but on watching it this time, I quite enjoyed it. As you're suggesting, Giles, it kind of was a sort of harmless historical romp. Everyone seems to be having great fun making it. It's hard. It's quite good humoured. It's hard to get upset about it, but it doesn't feel like it's got real. It's not like Pyramids of Mars where you feel like there's real sense of suspense and terror and something kind of really dangerous might happen. It's kind of a bit insipid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, it falls between the stools of the things that Holmes normally is really good at. And then even visually, I just don't really like. I don't like the direction at all. It just seems very flat. The sets annoy me. I mean, the thing is, I don't want to go on a rant, but it's just like within the first few minutes, I was thinking, yeah, this is why I don't like this. I remember, and the BBC are normally so good at this sort of thing, and yet the castle wall just look like painted backdrops, like from a cheap Amdram theatrical production, and I would know. And the weird painted flats with weird shiny plastic wooden doors. It looks so. And the robot knight. And yet, at the same time, you've got the Sontaran design, with the costume, the mask, the spaceship, which is brilliant. So, I guess some of the departments were firing on all cylinders and not others. But I don't know. I think the whole thing, I just felt within about 5 minutes, something happened that summed the whole thing up to me. A scene is supposed to end really dramatically when Irongron is raised to a fervour and vowing what he's going to do next, and he raises his axe high and slams it down on the table, and presumably it's supposed to thunk into the wood of the tabletop. And all it does is just smash a few things, a few cups jiggle about, and you get a close-up of nothing in particular, random bits of wood on the table with his axe light, and it's just... It seems like an odd thing to get really exercised about, but I'm an odd man. And I'm going to say that scene just summed the whole thing up to me. It's just half-hearted and imprecise.
For me, where it jumps the shark for me is the gunfight in episode 4, where Pertwee somehow manages to dodge 5 blokes with guns. I mean, it doesn't matter how bad they are at aiming. I mean, how could they possibly keep missing him so terribly? I don't know.
It's odd, isn't it? Because he never writes stuff like that once he's script editor. I guess he had less self-control. He would just expect Dix to tell him this is a bad idea. We can't do this, or whether it's we physically can't do this, or we can't make this look. Nobody could make this look convincing, Bob. You can type this stuff, Bob, but you can't film it. To paraphrase George Lucas.
It's also when the thing with the candelabra and Pertwee swings out and they start running away, and then they stop for a second so he can say to Sarah, it's just like that dashing a man from the flying trapeze, and then they run off again. And it's another one of those things of, well, it's a nice line, but really, would anyone stop to deliver it, to then run off? It feels a bit too much like a play and a bit not like a genuine...
Not in that actual... Given the set construction and the mechanics of what you've actually had done, and the fact it's a fairly low vent chandelier swing, really. Yes. Lessenby's literally swung from one side of a room to another at ground level.
Yes.
And luckily no one was standing in the way. So then disappearing out the door and then stopping on the other side of it. I mean, if it had been proper swashbuckling Robin Hood and he'd done it at height and had had some gallery he was going to be on, and so you could realistically assume that the villains were going to be a few minutes behind him, then yes, you got time to stop and have your witticisms. But going back to Sarah, Sarah Jane and the debut, and again, this is jumping around a bit, but
No, go.
given the sort of somewhat boilerplate feminism and so on, you do rather wonder what would have happened if April Walker had been cast
Yeah.
had actually, well, she was cast, but if she'd made it onto screen, being a rather more Amazonian type, as I understand it, compared to the petite Miss Sladen.
Well, it's a good point because, I mean, certainly Liz Sladen is able to carry off the kind of large number of different costumes, most of which are a bit pastiche but reasonably well, and to blend in the background and hide behind things, rather better than a taller person might be able to. So there is that. It's interesting. I mean, you just said Sarah, then you said Sarah Jane. It's an interesting question. That I mean, yes. I mean, if you look at the script, she introduces herself twice as Sarah Jane Smith, but the Doctor only ever calls her Sarah, and she's only ever referred to one other time, and that's by Sir Edward, and he also calls her Sarah. So, yeah, it's a bit bizarre. She seems to be convinced she's called Sarah Jane, and everyone else seems to be convinced she's called Sarah.
Well, if she only ever says Sarah Jane Smith, then perhaps she just for now got an obsession with middle names for some reason.
Yeah. Clearly, by the second story we're going to talk about, everyone seems to think that she's called Sarah Jane.
She's acquired a hyphen.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not unknown in this time, like a Tia Sarah Jane at the end of Planet of the Spiders, but she's much more often referred to as Sarah.
What about Sarah and
Sarah.
I'm being a terrible host tonight. I keep butting in, and everyone's forgotten what they're going to say by the time I've finished ranting on.
You whey-faced ninny. Sorry, I've written down
long-shaped rascal with a mighty nose.
I wouldn't have gone with that one. That's a bit too.
Very good.
Oh, that was it. Given the setting, and given that she's got quite a short haircut and everything, it's almost a wasted opportunity that they don't have her being mistaken for a boy or disguising herself as a boy in the traditional setup of
superb, and that would have fitted with the whole gender debate theme that had been tasked with introducing. Or would it have?
Yeah.
Would it have appeared to be undermining it and making a mockery? Well, you can do both.
Yeah.
I guess Liz Sladen, what you'd have to say about her performances is that she believes in the character, and so whatever else you're getting, it seems to be a very consistent and kind of thought out performance.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. And that's the thing. You see the experience and the reality that she will, continuously bring to the role.
I mean, the only difference here is that the incredible chemistry that she has with Tom Baker. I mean, there's definitely chemistry with John Pertwee here, but it's not at the same level, and I don't think it's I don't think it's ever going to get there during the course of this season.
Super.
Have we got anything else to say about the Time Warrior?
I haven't.
The only other note that I have is that Alan Bromley, apparently, the first time Kevin Lindsay had to say Sontaran, Alan Bromley apparently stopped and had a debate with him about how Sontaran should be pronounced.
Right.
And Kevin Lindsay won out, which begs the question of what other pronunciation.
Didn't Catherine Tate have trouble with it? Did she think they were Sontarans or something? Or was that
Maybe
actually on screen?
it.
I can't remember. I'm getting confused between reality and fiction.
Yeah, maybe that's it. Maybe that's what Alan Bromley would have inflicted on us.
But it was definitely Gallifrey right from the beginning. Just Tom Baker didn't get the memo. That's very Bob Holmes, of course. The fact that the Sontarans know of Gallifrey and the Time Lords and have opinions on them.
Yeah, and then Pertwee comes up with that Galactic Ticket Inspector line as well. I mean, obviously Robert Holmes comes up with the line, but it's delivered by Pertwee, which is.
I mean, we're still in living memory of the audience of the godlike Time Lords of the War Games, but Well, I suppose it was even closer to that we had that idiot in the bowler hat an umbrella flying around. So
yeah, I suppose that's the thin end of the wedge, isn't it?
Do you think when Pertwee and Sladen dress up as monks to go through the gate and they're completely cowled over, and Pertwee does his instantly recognisable Devonian accent to try to get through, are we supposed to recognise that it's Pertwee and so on, or are we supposed to be completely surprised when they sort of come the other side and he takes his hood off? I couldn't quite tell whether it was supposed to be a sort of knowing thing or whether he thought his accent was better than it really was.
pass.
Ooh, I think it's knowing. I mean, Pertwee was. This is still Pertwee was doing the Navy lark on his off days, wasn't he? And I think he was still well enough known as the silly voice man. We don't really get any. Do we get many silly voices in between? He does one in. Is it Spearhead? He does one fairly early on, or somewhere, and then
there's the one that doesn't make it on screen in Inferno as well.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, I'm trying to think. I know he does one somewhere in season 7, and I was very surprised. I was thinking his infamous, gritty end of Pertwee, and he's doing the silly voices, and then it does, I think, go away until although we still get the milkman and the washerwoman and things like that. So he's But yeah, no, I think that's knowing. I don't think they were trying to fool any. I don't think they were trying to fool anyone other than the comedy guards, who then get an equally daft comeuppance at the end with the old hi.
Yeah.
Which apparently there was a whole lot of business scripted. A combat sequence.
Right.
Was scripted for that, with them having to make a daring escape, and someone, I'm not sure who, rewrote it with. Thought let's just do a comedy gag and get out promptly. We've had enough running around and sword fights and stuff.
It's weird in watching this now. I still can't see Pertwee as anything other than old man, even though he's a good couple of years younger than I am right now when he was making it. So yeah, I don't know. I guess I have some appreciation for how he might have felt a bit stiff having to do all of the physical business, and maybe that's what sort of forced him to think about leaving at the end of this season.
Is this your way of suggesting that we get Terry Washington as a stand-in for you for the second half of this podcast?
Yeah, I think Terry may be past his best too, but yeah, but yeah, maybe stunt double. Okay, do you want to have a quick break?
Then perhaps we should relieve them of some of their abundance, eh, my friends?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought that was the end of the line. They're good neighbours. They'll not miss a little if they're plenty. It landed close by, I tell you. What? It landed close by.
Sorry I couldn't get anywhere near David Dacre, but...
It's splendid.
Oh, don't worry.
It had a consistency inside the character, whatever that character was.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.